Well, Jeremy, if you're happy to have me kick off, I'm good to get run with it. For those of you with your cameras on, good to see you. Those of you not, what's up? What's up? Yeah, so the purpose of today's conversation is to really dive deeper into some of these amazing land-based DAOs that are actually pioneering new structures of ownership and governance and really creating new models of what it means to be in community and in relationship. I'll go ahead and allow recording. So we've got three amazing speakers here today. We've got Samuel Delesque calling in from Alentejo, Portugal at Traditional Dream Factory. We got JD or John Dean calling in from LA from Cabin DAO, and Oisin from City DAO calling in from Portugal. I had the really eerie, great pleasure of meeting Oisin. Jeremy texted me last week being like, yo, do you think you could get the founder from City DAO to come to the panel? I was like, I don't know. I don't really know any of them. I think I talked to one of them on Twitter. I walk out of my office in this new co-working space, and my business partner is talking to somebody, and he's like, "Oh, have you met Sheen?" And he's like, "Yeah, I work at a project like called City DAO." I was like, "What? Like, are you serious?" So stars are aligned today. Loads of fun stuff happening. I'll lay out a loose structure for our conversation, and then really will flow, and people from the audience feel free to type questions in the chat. I usually try and keep audience questions nice and succinct because some people love to just monologue and like not ask questions, which is sometimes annoying, sometimes okay. So we'll try and keep it going. But yeah, basically we're gonna do a quick round of introductions, just basically who are they, what's the venture, and a little snippet of an origin story so we understand what they're coming from, what they're trying to do. And then give people a chance to cast like a long-term vision, tell us 10, 20, 30 years in the future, what does the world look like and how did your venture participate? And I think it'd be really fun to actually go deep into these obstacles, the frustrations, the barriers, the things that are really getting in the way. Because, these pioneering organizations are pushing on the edges of what's possible in so many different ways. And then we can kind of open from there, any themes or topics that emerge, try and just create some synthesis. And yeah, just kind of go with the flow, and people can jump in. I'll open up to audience questions as it rolls. But yeah, just before we do that, just wanted to check in with folks from the audience. If you can just chime in briefly, like, are you a founder? Are you a researcher? Are you a local generator? Just like give me some context about who you are. That'll just help me kind of frame some of the conversation. So just audience members, like one word sentence. Yeah, there you go. Student of life. I love it, Alex. All right. We're gonna go deep in that. It just gives me a little bit of context to see where people are coming from. But yeah, I will kick off the round of intros. Sam, with you, just quick origin story and kind of maybe like purpose of TDF and why it came to be. And yeah, man, keep it nice and sweet, and we'll dive into it in a second.
Awesome, and thank you for hosting, John. So good to have you here. Yeah, I'm Sam. I am a co-founder of TDF. TDF sits on lands stewarded by OASA, which is a Web3 conservation network. My background is in tech. I was working in tech in New York for a while, and I'm French and Danish originally. That's where I grew up. And yeah, in the last, let's say 5 years, I've been working on this vision of building regenerative co-living spaces around the world. And 2 years ago, we finally got access to the land here, the Traditional Dream Factory, where we're building the first prototype. And yeah, really just playing with all of these topics and seeing how much we can learn in those different fields. I'm super excited to hear from John and everyone else here. Yeah, all the experiences and catching up.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam. JD, I'll go with you. Similar style intro, purpose, organization, a little bit of origin story just to get us started.
Yeah, for sure. What's up, y'all? Hope you're doing well. My name is JD. I am a contributor with Cabin, and at Cabin, our goal is to build a network city. And what we mean by network city is a network of real estate properties around the world. We call them neighborhoods that focus on co-living, regenerating the natural land. What's up, Steven? And really just like connecting and thinking a little bit differently about how we live, how we move, how we work, and how we connect and gather. And right now we have 3 neighborhoods in the United States, and we're about to roll out our city directory, which I'll talk a little bit more about, which is super exciting. It's a platform. It's a central hub where community members can upload offerings around the Cabin ecosystem. We're really focused on creating places where people can work remotely in nature, have access to super strong Wi-Fi, but it's not so much that you're walking into the woods alone to work on your book for 3 years. You're really doing it with community along the way. My background's in real estate and urban planning. I absolutely love thinking differently about how people live and exploring alternative ways of living, and super excited to be here.
Hey, that's awesome. I really look forward to hearing more about like that progress you guys are on, and maybe unpacking also some of those key terms. It looks like you guys are kind of reframing some of like, what is a city? What is a neighborhood? How are you kind of playing with these building blocks? But we'll go to you, Sheen. Love to hear about your journey at City DAO. It was really refreshing hearing your take, kind of inside scoop, because I saw City DAO merge early days. But yeah, man, give us a quick snapshot of the story, sir.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I'm Oisin. I'm originally Irish, currently living in Lisbon. I'm one of the co-founders of City DAO and as well Missio. And yeah, so got started in kind of, again, the tech space, merged into Web3 and DAOs in 2019. And we kind of kicked off City DAO. So City DAO is a experimentation with decentralized asset ownership that kind of also led towards this network city, network state kind of route, which is super exciting. Currently, City DAO is being up and running for about 2 years, and we're refactored governance a number of times, and now we're currently going through another refactor. So it's a very interesting topic as well.
Yeah, mate. And do you want to touch on what you're doing at Missio as well? Because I feel like it's really, obviously adjacent and interesting.
Yeah, of course. So at Missio, basically what we're doing is we're trying to solve a lot of the problems that current DAOs are experiencing with things like voter apathy, engagement, not necessarily harnessing the collective intelligence within. So we're using a lot of AI stuff, machine learning, different interesting uses for vector stores and databases in order to try to democratize the decision process and try to boost engagement within DAOs and overall make them more intelligent.
Super interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot to pack into. It'll be nice to kind of bounce around between the City DAO dynamics and what you guys are doing at Missio, because it really does seem like you're on the edge of governance in particular, and seeing the challenges that DAOs face and building out smart tools that kind of front run some of the governance structures that we have in the world today. Awesome. Well, I think it'd be nice actually, before we go into like long-term vision stuff, let's just touch on where you actually are now, like scale, size, progress. Sam, I'll kick it off with you again, sir. Give us just a snapshot of the scale of the operations, kind of where you are and what's immediate next steps at TDF.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, like I mentioned, we've been on the ground for 2 years. In that time, we've been laying out a lot of the groundwork kind of for what's coming next. So that's include like getting all of the architectural plans and so on approved, the engineering plans, building our token economics, writing a white paper, kind of starting to build a community and all of those different pieces. And yeah, also setting up the whole legal structure. So setting up the nonprofit in Switzerland, registering, getting the DAO kind of registered so that it's registered in a legal way, and having this legal bridge, which is really important for us. And so, yeah, I would say we kind of did a lot of the groundwork to kind of get us ready to launch really. But yeah, I mean, again, there's like so many topics when you're building a village, at so many areas where you can learn and improve and so on. And yeah, right now, basically, we're really focused on kind of the digital aspect of things. So in the last 6 months have been really like deep dive into building a token. Now that we finally had the white paper approved, ready to launch this utility token, which is a conservation token, which means that yeah, all the land that we are purchasing basically is being put into this nonprofit, which serves the purpose of conservation and regeneration. And so that's like a really big thing for us, is that we really want to see this as like an entry to the commons and enforcing certain regenerative principles on whatever land we acquire, but while still providing like top level amenities to our users through the co-living spaces we are developing. And right now, like this year, it's all about getting the basics in place. So like building a farm, we built like a vegetable farm that can feed 30 people. We're building a natural pool so that we can stay cool in the summer. We're building the co-living space, which can keep us warm in the winter. We see the floors and stuff like that. So this year it's all about like kind of building this ground layer of infrastructure for us to be able to strive. And then in the future, the dream is really to start going into more into what does it mean to start businesses in such kind of places, right? So we have this concept of dream businesses, and we want to basically encourage anyone to come and start a business here. And whether you're passionate about growing carrots or about launching a token, like building Web3 projects, whatever it is that you're passionate about, we want to just give you the tools so that you're able to do it and create this container, this human container, where you have amazing human resources around you, super inspiring people and creatives and entrepreneurs around you, that it becomes like an incubator, basically.
Yeah, I love that. And I appreciate also how you highlighted the kind of legal structure. So the OWASA network, obviously having the Swiss foundation, which holds the land in perpetuity. I like how you described the kind of one-way ticket of like land is acquired, it's held in there. And then you used the word like enforcing regenerative principles, which I think is very interesting, kind of seeing your org design expressed through those opinions. Yeah, love the like playground of all these people coming together, whatever the aspiration is. This is a space for that. And I know that you guys have renovations on the way, like that you guys are making this a really exciting, beautiful co-living space. I loved looking through the deck and seeing the designs. If you haven't seen the TDF deck, so guys, yet do take a look. So super, super fun. What about you, Ushin? Give us a snapshot of where you guys are at City DAO. You know, a few statistics, snapshots, maybe a little bit on legal structure, but just to kind of state of the current affairs, if you will.
Yeah, of course. So CityDAO actually got started in June 21. I think it was when the Wyoming DAO law came out. So Scott Fitz, who's the founder, basically tweeted out, you know, who wants to basically put land on chain. So a bunch of us jumped at the opportunity and we created a Wyoming DAO LLC. We kind of like went by ourselves with about a couple of hundred community members for a few months until we purchased our first piece of land, which is a parcel 0, essentially what we call it, which is land in Cody, Wyoming. And then shortly after that, we had the likes of Vitalik Buterin and Mark Cuban and Brian Armstrong pick up the Citizen NFT. And then from there, the community wanted to decentralize. So we actually ended up electing a council that created what is now known as the City DAO Charter and Operating Agreement, which is what governs our organization. And currently we are in the process of exploring a different or newer version of the charter, and B, a bunch of different basically missions for City DAO. So we never really defined a super clear mission. It was always very broad. So right now we're going through a kind of a process to decide on what the new direction is for us.
Yeah, I think this touches on some really interesting pieces around the challenges, which we can unpack later. But just kind of picking up the liminal threads, that story of like started with a Twitter post, you know, like probably some guy who didn't think that, you know, 7 other founders be like, yeah, let's do this, man. Let's make a on-chain city. Like, let's go out and buy some land. And then like you said you raised like $20-some million, right? Like, and then all these, right?
Yeah, we raised, I think it was $8 million. So we originally did like a number of different sale mechanisms for the NFTs, and we raised maybe a couple 100,000 to begin with. And then as soon as Vitalik and these other, you know, large names bought up, they immediately, the treasury was $8.5 million the next day. But yeah, currently to date, we have around 6,500 NFTs and around like 6K individual members. So it's, you know, we're growing, but yeah, super, super cool.
Yeah, super interesting. Watch out, anyone. You might get Vitalik at any moment and have $8 million. You don't know what to do with. Be careful. JD, what about you guys? Snapshot of current affairs, any key metrics, just kind of, you know, where y'all are at physically, digitally, give us a sense.
Yeah, for sure. I love seeing all these introductions come in the chat. It's just so inspiring to be in a room with so many folks from different backgrounds. Yeah, so at Cabin, we are about 1 month out from celebrating our 2nd birthday. So I've been around for 2 years now, and it's been an amazing ride. It all started with a series of creator residencies where a group of people got together and said, hey, let's donate some funds to fund a creator residency. So people contributed to this donation crowdfund, and they got tokens in exchange for that, which they used to vote for the first cohort of creator residents. That first one was such a success. We said, you know what, let's do another one. So we did another month-long cohort. That one was awesome. So we said, you know what, let's do another one. And after we did that 3rd month-long creator residency, there was something clear that it was more than just, hey, let's bring people together from the internet to gather, IRL. And that's really where Cabin and the DAO was born from. And serving creators and the creator economy has been pretty core to Cabin's focus. Over the first 12 to 18 months, we did a series of retreats and other residency programs, which were a lot of fun. And I think through that, we learned that we really want to go deeper with these offerings and these gatherings. And that's really where our focus shifted over the last year to co-living and really putting co-living and co-living type gatherings at the center of Cabin. So we converted Neighborhood 0, which has kind of been the home base neighborhood for Cabin. It's a 28-acre property outside of Austin, Texas, in the Texas Hill Country. It's a beautiful space. And we converted that to full-time co-living. And now it's been an amazing ride. We have had almost 500 people apply to co-live at Cabin just since we kind of made that switch for Neighborhood 0. And we have since been growing our network. So we added 2 more neighborhoods into the network. Something to note about Cabin is that Cabin does not own any property. We are a network that connects these properties together. And we're really excited by that because one, it's driven by the people. It's a community curated process, and 2, it's more accessible. And it's not that Cabin now needs to go and buy all these places. It's not super capital intensive. And right now, after 2 years of gathering amazing people, we have said, okay, what are the digital tools that our community needs to take this up a level? And that's really where we came up with, basically, there's 4 important words right now in the Cabin world: census, citizenship, and city directory. So actually this Tuesday, we have our biannual State of the Network gathering, which is basically where we're soft launching, we're beta testing our census product, which is basically our community directory. It's our community sense making tool. It's going to be kind of the digital infrastructure for Cabin members to connect. Now, you have the census, it's your profile. So come on Tuesday. I just dropped the Particle link there. We're going to be making our profiles live. What's really cool about the census profiles is that they're tying in a lot of on-chain data. So we've airdropped hundreds of stamps, our passport stamps, to community members that have participated in build weeks, where people fly in and build things together, grow weeks, co-living, all these different gatherings. And we've airdropped a bunch of people's stamps, which are now going to show up as on-chain data on their census profile. So it's really our reputation and identity building system. So in addition to the stamps, we also have roles, and this has been a huge unlock for Cabin. And when we talk about kind of the state of current affairs for Cabin, we have different roles in our community. So builder, gatherer, creator, naturalist, caretaker. This is kind of the dream team of people that we think help makes for a beautiful space for people to gather. And every month we still do a creator residency, which is really awesome. And these roles are actually represented as on-chain data as well. So in your census profile, you're going to see your community roles, you're going to see your stamps. And then if you want to purchase the membership, which is our citizenship offering, you get access to the city directory, which we're publicly launching on May 23rd during our big second birthday party. I'll drop that link as well, but we can get into more of the details there. But just kind of the 4 words again: census, citizenship, and city directory are kind of the big things happening in Cabin right now.
I love that. Super interesting also, like that. Yeah, the key things that you guys have not necessarily stumbled on, but discovered that really enable a more effective organization and governance. I'd love to almost look at the other side a little bit and just be like, what's been frustrating as hell? Like, what hasn't worked? What has fallen apart along the way? Maybe we touch with your journey, Oshin. I think as we pioneer these edges, it's really nice to kind of open up the box of what's not working so other people can relate to the challenges of running these experiments.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems that we faced is very early on, because we became so decentralized very early on. So CityDAO basically got rid of its core team after maybe 6 months, 8 months of operation, and kind of started this council and charter, which eventually became guilds, which were very decentralized, probably one of the most decentralized organizations at that time. I think one of the biggest problems we had was that we were not a DAO that was like a protocol DAO or a financial DAO. We were a DAO that was largely interacting with the real world. And I think one of the biggest problems that we found and still find today is that the software and the oracles just don't exist to connect us with the real world in the level that CityDAO had the vision to, which, you know, is again our vision to be largely involved with creating that connection. But I don't think it's still at its you know, potential. I think that's one of the issues that we're definitely facing right now.
And can you unpack more about like why you guys decentralized so quickly? You know, like what was the motivation here?
Yeah, so the main driving factor behind that was actually the community. And the main reason why we also assembled the council was the community. So what we did is the community was kind of saying, oh, you know, you're not necessarily a DAO, it's still a core team. We want to empower more people. So we as a core team listened, and we essentially gave people the ability to go and create this charter. And from a very early stage, we realized that, okay, you can't go and ask people, you know, 6,000 people to contribute to a Google Doc. So this is where we said, okay, we need to have some sort of a representative democracy, which is, again, why the council became involved. So we did elections, and we basically elected 14 people along with the core team at the time, which had been reduced to 6, which then became the Council of 20, which was tasked at actually breaking up into teams to build out this charter, which was largely based off of the concept of the flat level organizational concept of holacracy.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think maybe we almost follow on that thread of like the pressure to decentralize. Has that been a trend in your journey, Sam, at TDF?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we've like also looked at this like push and pull, I guess, like between trying to push out as much into the community, like governance decisions, doing also, and then like pulling back and like recentering, having like a focused team. And I think DAOs in general are in that space of finding what is the right balance between like being fully community operated and being like kind of agile startup style. And so that's a little bit what we've been up to. And yeah, like we kind of explore this way of having the entire roadmaps completely co-created by the community in more like a in like circles, so like sociocratic circles. And so that's kind of the main ways that we were exploring last year. And then we found out that it's kind of hard to have people be so committed because change just happens so fast when you're in a DAO, when you're in this kind of startup environment, and things change almost on a weekly basis, and then people start to lose context. If you're not like fully engaged with a project, it's really, really hard to just stay up to date and to be able to make the best decisions. So I think it's really important to find that balance of delegation. And so yeah, so right now we're kind of exploring with a more role-based approach, and so having a bit more of like a core dedicated team that just ensures that the kind of scaffolding is in place in order to be able to actually host people to take action. And what we're designing is kind of this idea of like a TDF meta game where it's more like like a game where anyone can choose a level of engagement. And so if you want to just come and spend a weekend at TDF, it's possible, but you can also come and spend 3 months and be like full-on steward, being fully engaged, and just having that kind of gradual participation framework in place. But being supported by a team, like you need to have like a team that can basically take care of the people that come into this kind of structure, I think. And I think a lot of people were also struggling with how do you join a DAO, and like is it just about hopping into a bunch of different discords and just like contributing in all kind of things, or like how can you actually like streamline so that you can best delegate work in an effective manner and having teams that are actually executing and solving real challenges and not just debating about solving challenges. I think that's really the key here.
Yeah, totally. And this has been a really interesting journey for us at ReFi DAO, which, disclaimer, is not a DAO. We don't have a token. We don't really have any shared resources. We're grant funded, but we have like a long-term aspiration to progressively decentralize in a way that really maintains our efficacy as an organization in realizing a global regenerative economy. And there's been a lot of pressure from our community members being like, yo, like there's no decentralization. Like, how do we participate in crafting this and crafting that? And it's quite hard in the Web3 space to resist this pressure to decentralized ownership and control. And I think there's a level of kind of organizational maturity that's emerging to recognize, like, okay, when is it the right time to decentralize, and which aspects of the organization do you decentralize and when? And I think in particular, I've been fascinated by the role of the kind of visionary founder who saw the opportunity and said, like, hey, there's a thing that needs to come into being, and drew people together. And the role that this person has as what I would call source of connecting to a vision and calling it into the world. And I think the role of source is sometimes something that people in decentralized organizations have trouble like accepting and recognizing, because it's like, wait, does decentralized technology mean we need leaderless organizations? Actually, maybe not. Maybe these leaders are really important. Like in Ethereum, we have Vitalik, and, you know, Gitcoin is Kevin Owocki. Like there's all these examples of, you know, decentralized organizations that do have a visionary steward that kind of lead it forward while also implementing these, you know, governance structures. So I'm curious how any of these themes resonate with you in your journey, JD. Like, who was the, you know, was there original kind of visionary founder that brought it together? Was it you? Like, how have you balanced with that paradigm of centralization and decentralization?
Yeah, it's been a really fun and sometimes challenging road, because similar to like City DAO, for example, like we had a lot of people really excited by the mission and excited by participating in a decentralized organization. And about a year ago, we had a lot of different bounties and, you know, this contracting work opportunities available. And at one point we had dozens of people actively contributing, which is really exciting and allowed us to get our token into a lot of different people's hands. But I think what we learned from that is it's really hard to coordinate all of those people and be effective with allocating resources. And decentralizing just for the sake of it is not always the answer. So over the last year, we've kind of reframed how we get work done into pods, which some of you are familiar with. We call them fellowships. And basically, the DAO votes to fund certain initiatives. So for example, our podcast is a fellowship that was funded by the DAO. Oh, do we want to renew for season 2? Great, we'll fund that. Let's vote on it. Another big fellowship is what we call kind of the first fellowship, which right now is a core group of 4 people. I'm one of them. One of the co-founders, John Hillis, is another one of them. And then we also have Jackson and Chalice. And us 4, we think of ourselves first as community members, but, you know, as contributors, we really think of ourselves as service providers. And I think that's been a really helpful reframe, that we are here to provide services for the DAO and make sure that Cabin as an organization is running smoothly, and that, you know, all of the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And, you know, it helps to have some of that centralized leadership for running an organization that's growing quickly and has a lot of moving parts. Now, on our journey of decentralization, we still think it's super important. And the roles that I mentioned earlier are now actually guilds in of themselves. So these guilds are self-managed. So we have guild custodians, someone that is managing the naturalists guild and also passing on that power to artisans. So anyone could be an apprentice of any guild. It's basically raising your hand saying, hey, I'm interested in permaculture. I'm interested in DIY building projects, you know, great. But to level up to that artisan level, you need to somehow, and each guild decides on their own, how do we manage this? Is it attending a build week in person? Is it you know, completing a permaculture design certificate? You know, what are sort of the checkpoints along the way for folks to level up? And now these guilds are going to become their own basically self-run pods that are kind of like specialty groups that focus on different initiatives. So the Naturalists Guild just launched a plant club where we mailed a bunch of people seeds all over the world, and now a bunch of people are growing basil together. So you'll see in our Discord, we have a roles section with all the different roles. You'll see in the Naturalist channel, people are posting, you know, like my basil, and I'm also growing spinach right now. They just popped through the soil. You know, so people are sharing pictures. Someone just shared this morning, hey, I'm having a trouble with this plant. Does anyone know what to do? So that's a small example, plant club, you know, but I think the Naturalist Guild and this larger thread that runs through the Cabin community is we really care for the world and we want to do better. And how can we take on larger land healing projects and really think differently about land stewardship? So that's sort of our path to figuring out how to get work done and also amplifying voices and still having the power with the people, but also being grounded in, we got to get things done. We're launching a product as well. So let's push this product through and do it effectively.
Yeah, man, it's super interesting. And I think like learning these different tactics to govern effectively while maintaining, you know, your path to the core part of your vision is really essential. And I'd love to touch on the kind of land stewardship side, Sam, in particular, around like, what are the core activities you guys are doing? And what is the vision of how this grows and scales over a 10, 20, 30-year time frame?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, regeneration is really like the core pillar of how OASA was born. Like we really see like this transition into stewardship as like our core kind of value proposition, and also this is kind of what makes us able to have a utility token, is that we're a conservation network in the first place. We don't provide financialized incentives to our token holders, but it's really about how do we actually conserve land for future generations. And so, yeah, right now we started out in the first year, we did like a reforestation project. We planted about 1,500 trees on a hill that was deforested, and kind of working on like improving water systems. We planted a food forest last year with about over 1,000 trees in it. And now we just planted veggie beds to feed 30 people on the ground at any time. And so that's just like a little bit of the beginning of it on the first 5 hectares that we call a playground here at TDF. But really the vision is to scale this up into 100,000 hectares globally. That's kind of the numbers that we're targeting. So we're going to be looking at much larger properties, and then what we enforce on it is 50% of the land is going to get rewilded, because one of the main crises right now is in that crisis of biodiversity collapse. And one of the big reason that's happening is because biodiversity just doesn't have the space to live, and you have all of these species that are going extinct simply because their habitats are being destroyed because of our agricultural practices. So how can we bring back more spaces for more biodiversity to grow and flourish, realizing that all of this biodiversity and all of this natural landscapes around us actually provide us with all the benefits that we need to live. They provide us with clean water, with fresh air, with like storing carbon from the atmosphere and so on. So really seeing that as like, yeah, how can we be stewards of those natural assets, and how can we regenerate the planet at scale? And so yeah, that's a little bit the current challenges. And I think in the future, I mean, we're gonna see how this can scale to like much bigger areas, but really seeing the regenerative village as kind of the economic hub and the kind of intelligence point that enable all of this experimentation, and that brings stewards to the ground, that brings the technology to be able to actually regenerate areas of land, conserving water, and creating little hotspots around the world that can serve as a home for biodiversity.
And so how will it work with 100,000 hectares, a bunch of different villages? I assume that's, you know, hundreds or thousands of villages. Do you have to have like a coin to access each village, or like what is then the kind of relationship between the villages and how members can participate across them?
Yeah, so actually we're only imagining about 12 villages globally, but some of these villages would actually be the economic center for a much larger conservation zone, right? Like we're talking about thousands of hectares of land. For example, I looked at the property in South Africa, which was 22,000 hectares. That's the kind of scale that we would like to regenerate down the road, but not just regenerate in this case, like also just conserve and providing like a safe space for nature to flourish. And so yeah, like that's kind of our objective, like 12 villages globally that each can house like 150 people or so, kind of staying within the Dunbar limit. And each village is going to have its own token. Because to us, it's really important to have full sovereignty in each village. So each village has to adhere by the principles of regeneration and land stewardship. That's kind of the ground level. That's what we set up in the nonprofit, what everyone has to adhere by. So all of our members who come on the ground, they have to agree to those principles. The DAO itself has to agree to those principles in order to be part of this network of DAOs that's called OASA. But besides that, everything that happens in the village, like how do we live together, what do we build, how do we schedule those things, whatever, all of this is decision that's up to the DAO. and so up to for like local governance. And then of course each project has its own token, which means that it has full economic sovereignty. So you can decide if you want to print more supply, or how do you want to manage that? What does it even represent, and so on. And we see a world where there can be like this global network of villages everywhere. I mean, OASA villages, but also any kind of villages, whether it's cabin or any other type of regenerative kind of project that we're connected with, to be able to simply swap tokens from one village to another. And instead of, you know, putting all of your eggs in a single village, now you can spread your housing needs across 100 different villages, own a few of the different tokens. You can swap the tokens when you want to move from one country to another, and you're able to just put your money where your thoughts are, what you believe in.
Yeah, I love this. It's super interesting. And we've got a question from the audience for you, JD, which I'd love to touch on in just a second. But I want to go into like what activities you guys are actually doing on the ground at Plot Zero, Sheen. Is that being stewarded? Like, did you guys just own that? You mentioned you acquired this initial plot of land. Like, what's actually going on there?
Yeah, so Parcel Zero was actually originally acquired for, well, so we originally acquired it and we didn't necessarily know what we were going to do with it. We didn't actually know what we could do with it. This is where the experimentation thing comes into play. Eventually, because of like a bunch of different things, be it legal or logistics, we decided to actually reserve the plot for conservation and give people the right to use the land to a certain extent. So we did we basically broke up the plot into multiple thousand pieces, I think. Actually, we allowed any citizen to mint one of these Parcel Zero NFTs. So if you held a citizen NFT, you could mint. And then we have a very cool application that allows you to view which parcel is yours, as well as you know, the underlying infrastructure for the map. So you can see like if there's streams on your plot, or if there's you know, I think a gentleman called Denver Citizen in our Discord created a like a rubric essentially for things that existed on each parcel. So people that held like a rock or something, you get them attributes. But currently there's no plans to develop Parcel Zero. We have recently acquired a parcel called Parcel Blanca, which is currently got a few different experiments on it. I know one is called Blanc Canvas, or Blankenvas, I think some people call it. But essentially that's a collective art project, and also an experiment to put a tiny home on the property. And then there's currently actually a sort of like an RFP out, or a competition out, for someone to take on a lease of the property to do whatever they want with it. So we're super interested in providing the infrastructure for people to go and do these different experimental things with land.
And if you had a magic wand that you could wave to take the whole DAO in a specific direction, what would that direction be?
For the parcel in particular, for Blanca?
No, just like all of City DAO, man. Like if you were just like, hey, this is the way we're going, like what would the vision be, bro?
Yeah, of course. I think City DAO is interesting because it's not as in touch with the physical side of Cabin DAO and a bunch of other these pioneering DAOs in this space. And I think the City DAO is an interesting take on it, in that they're more of an infrastructure layer, or at least I think that they could be an infrastructure layer that can provide a bunch of other DAOs with the infrastructure and tooling necessary to essentially integrate with the real world. We're still at a stage where we're sort of, you know, some DAOs are not true DAOs and they can't interact properly with the real world or with real governments or tax systems, or being able to even acquire and own land as a collective. So I think City DAO is definitely making leaps there. And I think, you know, in the future, I think hopefully we'll see a little bit more cross collaboration across a bunch of different projects to achieve that goal.
Totally. Yeah. I love that kind of like composable interface into the real world. I think, you know, the primitives that are built in this cycle to really make that easier, I think will unlock some really interesting projects in the next cycle. Curious to hear your guys' take, JD, on kind of like what's on chain, what's off chain. Like you mentioned that Cabin DAO doesn't actually own the land, but how do you kind of deal with the on-chain, off-chain divide, and what are the kind of access routes? We had a question from somebody in the chat around like, do you have to own the physical token, or like, is there an alternative to this? We'd love to hear your thoughts on how you manage that paradigm.
Yeah, totally. So The census and citizenship are really pulling on-chain data, and this is really for community members to build their reputation and identity. In terms of how the token is currently working, what's really exciting about the city directory is it's a version and our version of a TCR, a token curated registry. If you guys remember back in the day, this was a big hot topic. Well, we've been really interested in how our community could use something like this. And I think we figured it out, which is really exciting. And the city directory, so I'll just dive a little deeper into the city directory because it's really like one of the cornerstone offerings of this product suite we're rolling out. The city directory is a platform where any citizen, any member of the Cabin community can upload different IRL offerings. So it's not Cabin saying, hey, we want to open up, a location in Portugal. It's a community member saying, hey, I own a property or I'm renting a property out here and I have an extra couple bedrooms available in my co-living space. Let me upload this to the city directory. And the city directory, go ahead, sorry.
Keep going. This is really interesting. Super interesting.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So community members will upload their offerings, and those offerings fall into a few buckets. One is paid co-living. Hey, I want to support the neighborhood financially. I'm willing to pay for, in exchange for housing, more traditional. Another offering type is a work stay exchange. So we're really interested in kind of experimenting with definancializing real estate and thinking differently than the classic landlord-tenant relationship. And the work stay exchanges and these role-based residencies are really that opportunity. So we had our first builder in residence live at Neighborhood 0 last year, and he built a tiny cabin. We had our first naturalist in residence set up a composting system at one of the neighborhoods. And these are work stay exchanges, 10, 15, maybe 20 hours a week, and you get housing. So that's the second type of offering. The third type of offering that are going to be commonly uploaded are build weeks or grow weeks, which I mentioned a little bit, where basically the neighborhood owner, we call them the caretaker, they say, hey, I want to build this project, come out for the week. I'll put you guys all up. I'll feed you. I'll give you housing, and let's build stuff together. We've had now 7 or 8 build weeks in the Cabin network, and the builder ethos is really a big part of what we're doing. So we have all these different offering types and gatherings. The city directory is the platform for people to upload those different types of offers. Now, the token curated registry comes into play at this point because now community members can allocate their Cabin tokens to their favorite offerings. So say at Neighborhood 0, they're doing co-living right now. And, you went out there for a month of co-living and you absolutely loved it. And you said, wow, I, as a community member, really want other community members to see that this is a super awesome experience. I'm going to allocate some of my Cabin tokens to that. So say I have 100 Cabin to allocate. I'm going to put 80 of them at Neighborhood 0, and I'm going to put 20 of them at Montaya Base Camp because I love that co-living neighborhood. Great. So all of our token holders, which is now over 500 different community members, are constantly dynamically allocating their Cabin tokens to their favorite offerings on the city directory. And that naturally is a community curation process where the most beloved offerings come to the top of this city directory. And if someone has a bad experience at one, maybe they pull their allocation from that. So this is kind of a live feed of what are the most awesome offerings in the Cabin network. And it's also a way to keep the caretakers and the gatherers accountable for having great experiences. So if a caretaker isn't there, or they didn't change the bed sheets, or they overbooked and people have bad experience, instead of leaving your Uber driver 4 stars, you might just not allocate your Cabin tokens. So we're really excited by this community curated registry that's going to be the city directory. So I'll drop a link to the city directory interest form. What's really exciting is right now we're having conversations with folks all over the world about, hey, what are your offerings right now? Do you have an extra bedroom available in your co-living space? Do you want to host builders out for a build week? Do you want to host a naturalist in residence to get that project off the ground? So I'll drop a link in the chat right now. Basically, we have until May 23rd to pre-populate the city directory with this initial sort of batch of offerings that people can then see and have access to. So it's really a place for people to connect with each other and connect with spaces.
Dude, I love it. It's not too dissimilar to a kind of decentralized Airbnb, but it's that the offerings are different at a kind of different unit level, like the tech that you're talking about, like a naturalist artist in residence. It's kind of a different mental model, but a similar kind of sharing economy principle. But then you add in the kind of, as you talk about, the cabin token allocations, where there is this like economy that is being made by this whole system. So dude, I'd love to jam about like, yeah, what we're doing in Lisbon and how we could use that platform approach to make it, you know, possible for more people in this community to offer their spaces. Because I think there's a really powerful paradigm shift when the platform is just, you know, enabling people to offer the resources that they want to share to this amazing community that's gathered online, that's now gathering in person. I think that's a really fascinating approach. And I'm curious to understand, you know, JD, like what your guys' 10-year roadmap is. Like, where does this go from here? Like, assume the cabin directory crushes it. Like, what's your guys' big, grand, audacious vision here?
Yeah, totally. Well, it's a great time to be asking those questions because on Tuesday, during our biannual State of the Network gathering, we're also going to be publishing our white paper, which we're calling our vision document, which is basically building cabins network city. So in there, we have our 5-year, you know, vision, we have our 5-decade vision, and then of course we have our 5-century vision, and really thinking far out into the future humans and how can we steward the world for them. And I think right now in the next 5 years, our focus is welcoming in the first 5,040 citizens. You know, Aristotle
2040.
Aristotle was a big fan of that as the optimal size for a city. But I love the Dunbar's number shout out as well. And these are a lot of the conversations we're having as well. Like, what are the different layers to our network city? What is the best mix and number of people at a different location and gathering at any time? But really the next 5 years are welcoming in, you know, new citizens to cabin and really filling this neighborhood directory, this city directory with a lot of great offerings. And yeah, I think Airbnb is an okay comparison. Of course, it's a platform connecting people in space, but you know, for us, it's really like grounded in the people and the human experience. So it's not showing up at midnight, fumbling with the lockbox, seeing if you can get in. You never meet the owner. You don't interact with the local community. You don't, you know, kick your shoes off and put your feet in the soil. It's really like, where am I? What is the culture here? How can I contribute? How can I learn? You know, how can I participate? And it's really gathered in the human experience first. And then of course the nature piece as well. We're really focused on offerings that are in nature, near major cities, but really out in the country where you can get that deep work done. You know, you can read that book, you know, but also connect to Wi-Fi. You got to do your remote job as well.
Oh, dude, man, this sounds like the dream. We should totally hang out. I got to come see one of the cabin spots in the US, and hopefully we can get some balls rolling in Europe as well.
I would love that. I'm gonna be in Europe this summer, so maybe we can link
Portugal,
up there.
Man.
Yeah,
hit us up, dude.
I would love to hang.
TDF in your dreams, mate, in reality as well.
For sure.
I'd love to hear a little bit more specifically, Sheen, about Missio and like what exactly is it that you guys are building and what will be made possible for land-based DAOs like City, Cabin, and TDF?
Yeah, of course. So Missio is Missio is actually Latin for mission. And the original goal of Missio was to essentially create mission alignment in DAOs or even just traditional organizations or governments. And the reason why we kind of built this tool was because of a lot of disalignment in CityDAO at the time. So CityDAO has gone through, again, this decentralization process. And I think what I love to, what you were saying about Cabin DAO and a couple of other DAOs that I've seen out there is that they've really embraced the more kind of progressive decentralization route, which I think is an important term that wasn't so common at the time. But, you know, some issues that occurred in CityDAO after people realized that there was not necessarily some enough incentives to keep people involved. There wasn't, you know, enough projects happening to keep regular engagement. And we saw a lot of voter apathy, essentially. So a lot of voters were, you know, disinterested or not participating. And one of the things that contributed to voter apathy was also the lack of just general engagement inside of the DAO. So one of the things we believe at Missio is that in DAOs, people vote, and voting is obviously very valuable. However, there's a whole layer that is not being harnessed, which is this kind of collective intelligence. So in Cabin, in TDF, in City DAO, and a lot of these larger DAOs, which are kind of more network city DAOs, which have a bunch of different people with a bunch of different expertise across a bunch of different niches, right? Whether it's real estate, whether it's land, farming, any of these kind of things, it's very difficult to harness that collective intelligence with this kind of binary vote. So someone approving or rejecting a project. So the goal at Missio is essentially to use, the leaps in AI that we've made over the past year, and machine learning as well, to create ways for the wider community to become engaged, but also to use that information in a meaningful way. So say, right now people vote and they say approve or reject on a project. And if they want to comment on that project, they use discourse or whatever forum, process, or Discord to voice their opinion. What we want to do is we want to allow people to actually engage with DAOs in a way that is bringing the proposals to them as opposed to making them go to the proposals. And we do this by using a bunch of different interesting ML techniques to essentially create databases that can actually determine similarity of opinion and create structure behind the data that isn't currently there in DAOs. So we can make people write better proposals. We can show how many people are aligned on specific proposals. We can, create responses to proposals or votes based off of, someone's general opinion on previous proposals. So the goal here is to basically create a more democratic infrastructure for DAOs and hopefully make them more intelligent.
Yeah, and I thought it was super interesting when we were talking this idea of like having so many more data inputs than just the like active participation on a forum or a proposal, where it's actually you can really analyze sentiment of people across all of the different mediums of communication that you already have, your Twitter, your Discord, your Telegram, your support inbox, the intercom. Like you've got all these different facets where people are engaging, and you can build up a much more nuanced, comprehensive view of how people feel about certain things and if that sentiment is changing. And like I just think these are super interesting tools where we're actually starting to like recognize, okay, when is it the right time to push a binary proposal, or how do we actually have more meaningful conversations about this stuff? And getting people to meaningfully and actively participate in DAOs is always like super freaking hard. The voter engagement rate in life in general, and like real world governance is super tough as well. So is your thought that this just kind of makes it easier for people to participate, or is it just that it makes it more effective? Like what's the kind of key vector of change that you guys see Missio enacting in DAO governance?
Yeah, of course. So it's definitely like two major avenues. One is like on the engagement side, and the second is on the intelligence / kind of insights. From the DAOs that we've analyzed, you have anywhere from 1 reply in every 40 views, and this is views, not members. So you have even less views. So 1 reply in every 40 views, all the way up as far as like 1 reply in every 400 views. A lot of the most common DAO forms. This is like Gitcoin, Aragon, Bankless, City DAO, all of these like major DAOs. So yeah, the goal here is to basically create a way for people to engage easier. So we're bringing a number of mediums for people to engage through, whether, if people want, we can do text message, right? But the main ones are Discord, of course, Chrome extensions, just ways for people to interact in an easier way. So yes, the goal is to significantly improve that engagement rate, so we can essentially harness this collective intelligence layer is what we're trying to call it. So right now you have City DAO, which is 6,000 members. Imagine if you had 20 million members in a specific DAO, right? And if you're trying to even harness 0.02% of those 20 million people, you still cannot understand that data, right? The data does not make sense at that level, right? So this kind of leads into the second part, which is the intelligence and insights, is we're trying to capture, in an ideal world, if DAOs scale to this network state level or network city level, then we would have thousands of opinions. And we're trying to make sense of that information in a way that is actually useful to DAOs. And that's kind of the second part.
Yeah, dude, super, super interesting. Well, Nate, I'm glad your experience at City DAO has lent you on this path of making this powerful new tool. I've seen how hard it is for local city and state governments to engage meaningfully with constituents. And if you guys are able to pioneer stuff that really works for DAOs, hopefully we can manage, the trillions of dollars that go into public goods and, you know,
Yeah.
transportation, education, housing, all this stuff. You know, because I think that's what these DAOs will end up starting to govern, is the failures of the current structures. So super interesting. I'll shift to you, Sam. We've got a nice question from Natalia in the chat around like, what is the ultimate size of a village? And maybe you can talk about how many people you have now as members of TDF and what you're kind of looking for, what kind of capacity you have. And then the second question is like, you know, governance, voting. How does this work? How do you actually, you know, enable these token holders to really participate in the resources that are shared? And then we can touch on the third part later around like, do you actually need a token?
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, around the size, so we're building a co-living space with 14 suites, 4 studios, a house, and that's kind of phase 1 of the project. That's what's been approved by the municipality and so on. This is repurposing all the existing building. So how can we build something with the lowest impact is also repurposing something that already exists and using sustainable materials for the construction and so on. And yeah, and so that's a little bit the starting point. It's like a place for like 30 people to live, give or take. The land is 25 hectares. So on the land, we have possibility to expand to 4,000 square meters urbanizable as well. So where we can build more houses, there's a farmhouse, there's an old mill, there's some more cultural dependencies and a few ruins here and there. So, I mean, there's a lot of places we can develop. And I think kind of the ideal size, I think, would be like around 150, like if you look at like kind of medium term, to what we would like to grow to. Bearing in mind that, again, like our goal is to build kind of these prototypes around the world. So we also want to refrain from just forever growing, but just kind of trying to find the right size, which I think should be around this Dunbar number, like 150 people in this village, and then starting to replicate around the world and having kind of other villages replicating in other kind of cultural context, economic context, ecological context, and seeing how we can actually create those blueprints in different kind of scenarios. And so one kind of key piece that we're bringing to the table is this concept of proof of presence, which is like one of the main things of how we want to actually do governance. It's saying actually what really matters if you have to make the decisions about how we're going to be living together in this village. Well, it should be like, how much time do you actually spend in this village? So that's why like a lot of our governance mechanics is based around this. So proof of presence, which has like a weight of 5. So basically it's just how many nights you spend in the project per year. So if you think of like nation states, the way they do voting is like, either I'm a citizen, I vote, I'm not a citizen, I don't vote. And so when you vote for a president, that's how it works. You can only do it in the country where you hold citizenship. And it's like a very binary kind of thing. Whereas we're trying to bring a more nuanced approach to it, where you can vote on your delegates or whatever decisions within your DAO for each of the local entities that you're participating in. And you can do that to the extent that you're actually participating in those. So through proof of presence, again, like the main one being just that you just show up and you're just here. The second one we're doing is proof of sweat. So that's also really simple. It's just like, how much did you actually contribute to the DAO? Like, how much did you put your sweat and effort into it? And so that's just like basically a count of how many tokens you earn from the DAO for your work, which also gives you a higher governance right. So even if you say resell these tokens or whatever, then you can retain the governance right associated with it. And on both of those, both the proof of presence and the proof of sweat, we want to apply a decay function, just recognizing that efforts done recently has a higher value in terms of context, giving, and so on, than things done a long time ago. So if you earn 100 proof of presence in 2023, those are going to be worth more than if you earned 100 proof of presence in 2022, for example. And then it would just decay on a logarithmic curve. And yeah, that's a little bit how we, like what we're trying to pioneer with, is like this concept of, yeah, bringing some Lego blocks to that can kind of get the digital DAO space with the physical land-based space, and how we can actually, yeah, bring together those two kind of concepts. And sorry, what was the third part of the question again?
Like, do you actually need a digital token, or could there be a physical alternative to this blockchain-based currency? Like, what if I'm not in the Web3 native world? Is there a physical way?
Yeah, I mean, that's like a really good point. And I think what we've been discovering over the last months, I mean, we got really excited about, having our token approved and actually having the whole legal infrastructure to be able to do it, which is really hard. And, we had to register a nonprofit in Switzerland, and it was like a 2-year kind of thing, trying to figure out how to do it, where to register, what kind of legal structures can host this kind of thing, and so on. Kind of designing the whole thing. And then from that, I mean, I think one of the reasons why we're doing it and why we're trying to kind of go the Web3 route is, it's just to provide more sovereignty and more independence to our members over time. But we also found out that, even though as a Web3 nerd, let's say, like you want to be able to own your tokens, and you want to be able to take those governance decisions and decentralize ownership of the spaces. But there's still a lot of onboarding that needs to be done. So I think a lot of our role right now is around taking this physical farm, educating people in what does it actually mean to hold a token, and where the token actually gives, in our case, perpetual access to these facilities, right? One token is one night spent at TDF per year forever. So it's really like a long-term commitment. And we see this as like, okay, like we're moving in together, you're getting your mortgage kind of commitment, even though it's not a financial token and so on, but that's kind of the type of commitment. But to get to that point, we have this whole onboarding journey of like, first, well, maybe you come for a weekend and maybe you get your membership, and maybe you come and you spend a few days per month. And so we are onboarding them with a Web2 experience, which kind of mimics how the token works, where you can get these nightly credits, which kind of correspond to what you would get with one token per year. But it's just Web2 world is like super straightforward interface. We have basically built like a booking system. So if you compare to Airbnb, you have your booking request. So anyone can, basically get a membership. They can submit a booking request, and then they can come and check out the place and so on. And then for members that already have gone through like a cultural onboarding and so on, we enable them to just have instant booking. So then they have full sovereignty, they can check into the space. And when they check into the space and actually do that, then we have a social proof that says, hey, this person was present for X amount of days. So actually they're earning governance, right? And they can now make decisions in this DAO.
Yeah, super interesting as you're kind of grappling with these different reward mechanisms. And I think, touching back to the original question around like a physical artifact, this is something I've been playing with. It's like, okay, a lot of people don't want to have a wallet, manage private keys and all these things. Like, what if we could actually build small hardware wallets that also had NFC chips and just gave you access to a physical place, and what if we could really abstract some of the complexity and really try and perform the basic functions of just being in a space to simpler hardware that we can carry with us. I think a lot of the kind of Web3 UX assumes very high technical capability, and it kind of produces a lot of barriers to entry for so many people. So I'm excited about kind of, how different devices can help to break that physical digital divide. Some interesting question. Go for it.
Could I jump in? Sam, I'm curious. First of all, I love the proof of presence and the proof of sweat. It's really interesting. And definitely conversations we've had, our NFT stamps are kind of similar in the sense that they're reputation building, but not necessarily governance. But how do you assign value to these different tasks? So like, for example, like, and some of our co-living experiences, like, you have to do your dishes, like you dirty a dish. So I don't think people are expecting to get governance for cleaning their dishes or wiping the countertop, but, digging a huge hole in the ground to, create a pond, that seems like it's a heavier lift. So like, where do you draw the line, and how do you incentivize just like people wanting to help out because they care versus like people helping out because they're getting something in exchange?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. And how do you distribute value? I mean, at the top level, it's a negotiation between the individual and the DAO. Like whatever kind of that agreement can come down to, and that it can be your employment contract that says, hey, every month you're gonna be getting 10 TDF tokens for doing this work. Or it can be, hey, like there's this small task. We're just looking for someone to do it, like to dig this hole for 3 days. Who wants to come and do it? And they can earn a couple of TDF tokens. The way that we kind of looked at it is very practical. So it's like, we have a space we have to operate. So how do we distribute the value between, say, volunteers and people who come and who just do their own work, for example? So our volunteering schedule is like you work 3-4 hours per day doing things for the project. That gets defined by the stewards on the ground, and we're trying to move more towards what's project-based. So for example, we just built a helify filter behind me here, which is our gray water treatment system. And so that was like a project that lasted for a couple of months. We had like a resident who was kind of in charge of it. And then we bring in volunteers who can kind of contribute for that. So if people are already contributing like those 2-3 hours, it's kind of like the volunteering contribution. And that's how they earn for their stay. And in order to earn the token in general, it's a bit more like if you start to take a bit more leadership, or if it becomes a bit more like a full-time kind of position. And it's more about like I think going a little bit towards what you talked about earlier about having this kind of project-based things that we want to drive towards. So saying like we want to build a natural pool. Here's our total budget for this kind of project, and this is what we expect out of it. Because then that becomes something that you can make a decision on, and then you can then have someone who manages this project, who then distributes the rewards to the people who are involved in the project, however feels best to that person.
I think it's interesting. You're both kind of touching between, like Cabin is kind of touching on the reputational side of things, and then TDF is kind of touching on the more so monetary / tangible kind of asset side of things. Like at City DAO and in Missio, like one of the things we were trying to identify is, okay, how are people incentivized? I actually spoke on a Twitter Spaces about incentives in DAOs only last week, and it was very interesting to explore like what different incentives different people valued. And I think like both of you are probably in a very unique position to actually utilize both of your different methods. So if Cabin can actually figure out a way to both create reputational incentive, and then also TDF can kind of use what Cabin are doing in terms of utilizing your token or your sweat token for also providing to reputational incentive, and even actually some cross collaboration between projects to actually cross communicate this reputation score is what I think I'm super interested in. Is like there can only be so many versions of reputation identity, and who's going to essentially start to incorporate other people's projects into this these reputational IDs essentially.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I see some kifters on the call here today, and like as we've built out this platform, we've had some conversations with, some people at Kift of like, what would it look like for Kift to use this platform? Or what would it look like for TDF or OASA to use? So like we're building out this, airdropping of NFT stamps. And this is a product that we can share with the world. Obviously like we built it originally because we have a need for it internally. But I think that's what's really inspiring about all of this network building is like, we're all trying to, solve similar problems, and we can really work together, and a rising tide definitely floats all boats. And especially when we're talking about caring for the planet, because frankly, we don't have that much time. Like we need to get to work. So like, shout out to all the people that are like doing the work right now, TDF planting all those trees, like people really thinking differently. It's just like really inspiring. And like, what I would love to like leave this gathering with is like, how can we keep working together, and how can we really do this in a meaningful way that changes the planet and, creates deep connections among the people that we're sharing the space with.
Beautiful, man. Thanks so much. And Sante, if you guys want to share a little bit about what you're doing and the use case from which the Cabin collaboration emerged, it'd be super interesting. Just continue that thread.
Yeah, for sure. This is Matai, Santi. We're from Kift. Kift is a van life collective. So we're solving for housing crisis, global change, the need to build these like geo-distributed cities that move with the weather. So we're a collective of van lifers that basically we have NFTs, that's your membership token. We then figure out what properties we want to get. We set them up for usually a season, sometimes a year. And then we get about 20 people on a property. Everyone sleeps in their van, but then we turn the bedrooms like this one in a co-working space. We upgrade the kitchen, so we all cook together, we hang out.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we've got like a distributed network. We've got 4 properties last year. This year, we're taking some of our houses offline. We're trying to go a little bit more east down to like Austin. Trying to partner with Cabin, so we'll send some KIF folks out there. That's been a super cool way of like sharing this land that we're both like, how does the Cabin token interface with the KIF NFT and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the. Want to add anything else?
And while we started with van life, really the goal is to make like affordable, accessible housing with an intentional co-living lens. So we're really stoked about what Cabin is releasing, just for it to open up the opportunities for people to come together and share intentional co-living experiences. Whether you're sleeping in a house, in a tent, in a tree fort, in a van, you know, we say van life and we say van, but all shapes and sizes of vehicles. We've got some tiny homes set up on our Joshua Tree property, and really just like when you come together as a community and start to share in these experiences, I'm sure anyone who's had a co-living experience, college might count to some extent, but I think it takes we're a little naive or immature in college. Maybe once we're out in the real world and adulting with our big person hat on, we really see the difference of what it means to come together as a community to work on stewarding shared resources and creating something that's beyond any one individual goal, and really about just working towards a more regenerative, sustainable future. We're stoked. I was just looking at some of the stuff the Tiny House Factory was doing, or not Tiny House Factory, sorry, Tiny Dreams.
The Dream Factory.
Dream
Yeah,
Factory.
yeah.
And like, you know, farming, planting, like we all need to get our hands in the dirt more often and collaborate on those ground up solutions that are really going to help change the tide of things.
Sorry to poke fun at you, bro. I love what you guys are doing. I think we need City DAO helping to come in and buy some land next to TDF. Cabin, you guys can help a bunch of people get up spaces and set up offerings, and we get the van life army and the solar panels on the hood, and we get this thing rolling, man. Let's do this. Super fun. Love the collaboration vibes. Go for it, Oshin. You want to say something?
No, I was just going to say that one of the things that we were exploring more recently was like a property down in Costa Rica, essentially. And I think I talked with John about it in the Web Lab co-working space. And essentially, like, we figured that one of the things, aside from what I was saying earlier, was City DAO is exploring right now becoming a way for people to essentially set up smaller villages, essentially very similar to what Cabin DAO is doing. But we recognize that maybe there's 3 layers to this. There's, you know, one is the person that needs to buy or own the land, or at least have access to the land. The second is the people that need to manage and keep the land afloat. And then the third is to kind of have somebody to do the events kind of side of things. So there definitely is some very interesting collaboration amongst a bunch of different DAOs. I mean, KIF DAO, Cabin DAO, TDF, Refi. I can name a bunch more that are starting off and that are more established, that I think there needs to be some more kind of cohesiveness in the space to re-achieve the network city goal. One of the things you kind of touched on at Cabin DAO, I think, was the ability for you to essentially create this network state, but in distributed homes that are not necessarily owned by you, they're owned by other people. And this was interesting to me because one of the reasons why we steered away from stuff like that at City DAO was because we were super focused on, like, okay, owning the land and being able to do the network state to us. And this is also interesting because multiple people have different definitions of what a network state is. The network to us was actually owning the property and being able to interface with traditional infrastructure, which is a really unique way of getting around that is by what you guys are doing at Cabin DAO, and KIF, obviously, of course, as well.
Yeah, it is super interesting. I mean, I think there are a lot of different ways to approach this. I think what we've seen and why we're excited about kind of continuing to lean into the more asset light approach and really like bringing the property owners, you know, we call them caretakers, along, is because it's very hard to do what you guys are doing. And like, it's awesome. Like, I absolutely love it. And I think that's like an amazing path to walk down. I think the path we're walking down, it's like, I may meet someone on this call today that has a couple extra bedrooms in their co-living hub, and boom, we listed on the city directory and we're off and running, and we're building that network out really from the one-on-one connections and really like starting there. But I think it's really cool both ways, and excited to see how all these different paths evolve, emerge, and then coalesce as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
Totally. Well, hey, it seems like we've gotten to an amazing state. We're an hour and 15 in. Are there any questions from listeners? Just, itching recommendations, suggestions, thoughts, offer the space. It seems like there's been nice cross-pollination here. I also recognize it's late on a Saturday for a lot of folks, including Usheen, you, but feel free, anyone that wants to unmute and inquire, please do so. And if nothing's burning, I'll ask the final question, which is, for people listening that want to get involved with what you're doing, just real quick call to action for each of you. We'll start off with you, JD, go to you, Sam, and then end with you, Usheen. What can people do to get involved?
Yeah, sure. Well, we have a lot of really exciting online gatherings coming up. I mentioned the one on Tuesday. That's our biannual State of the Network. So if you want to learn more, if you want to really find ways to tap in and get involved, come on Tuesday. And then, of course, on May 23rd, we have our second birthday celebration, where we're actually publicly launching the city directory and cabin citizenship, our membership offering. So there's a lot of great stuff. Of course, you can join our Discord. What I'm going to drop in the chat here right now is a Google Doc. It's our important links and gathering document. This is a live updated document that I actually am updating in real time. So what I usually recommend to our community members is just bookmark this document. And then if you have a thought of like, hey, what's going on in cabin? Like, where can I learn? Or, hey, I want to co-live at cabin. Like, where's that application link? I can't find it. Like, everything you need is in this document. You'll see RSVP links, the upcoming, gatherings, co-living, city directory interest form. My email address is there. I'll also drop my email address here, as well as my personal Twitter. So folks want to connect there. And then, of course, if you want to check out our website, cabin.city. And I would love to see y'all floating around in the Discord, see creating your census profiles once we go live on Tuesday. And probably most importantly, see you all in real life soon and get to break some bread and say hi across the dinner table.
Yes, sir. Love that. Thanks so much, man. I can feel it. Sam, what's the call to action for folks listening and want to get involved with TDF?
Yeah, thanks. So, we're launching our token, TDF token. Everything is going to go through our website, so traditionaldreamfactory.com, which is been developed by Closer. So, it's just to close off, I wanted to kind of mention it because we talked about how we can create more collaboration between those different projects and kind of share protocols and interfaces and whatnot. And we basically built this Closer as a standalone entity, which we want to have it as its own DAO. It's going to be co-owned by all of these different regenerative village projects around the world. And so that's kind of the place where we are putting all of our tech and IP and whatnot that is meant to be replicable by anyone on the planet. And so if you check out traditionaldreamfactory.com, which is a current kind of MVP prototype, well, you'll be able to do kind of, all the offerings that we are doing. So the token launch is going to be on there in the next few weeks. And just coming to our events and just coming to hang out with us.
Super stoked, man. Cannot wait. Usheen, what's the call to action both on Missio and City DAO for folks who are interested in getting involved?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So for City DAO, honestly, we're in this stage where anybody can get involved. Like, no matter who you are, if you have any interest in DAOs, any interest in cities, we are now a very small group of contributors that are currently trying to shape the future for City DAO. So if you have a vision, bring it along. I think everybody is open to hearing it. I think it's a super kind of foundational level that we're at, where we're willing to essentially go down any route that makes sense. So come along and just contribute in any way. Your voice will definitely be heard. And then on the Missio side of things, we're hoping to work with as many DAOs that are interested. We're looking to provide kind of an alpha in probably about 2 weeks to 3 weeks. So the start of May. We want to help your DAOs to engage your members and also to just make your community overall more intelligent, so you can really harness that kind of collective within. So thanks.
Love it. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And any closing thoughts from you, Jeremy, around agenda programming for the Rest of Prosperity or the Rebuild conference?
Yeah, well, we're coming up towards the last few sessions. Well, the last few sessions, in fact, across the different channels. I will be in the Planet stage with James Ulrich from Regen Villages, which is very exciting. And I think there are a couple of other talks as well. We've got the user. So yeah, we've got Micro Solidarity with Rich Bartlett, who is a fantastically interesting guy. He's going to be on the People stage. We have James Ulrich from Regen Villages, who was one of the OGs of the regenerative village building space, giving us a big insight into how he's using machine learning software. And on the Purpose stage, we've got sharing the current challenges of building large-scale village based on principles of open governance and land stewardship with Eugenio and Leonard, who are really fascinating, interesting guys. We've got an enormous project in the Azores. The last stage on prosperity, unfortunately, that was cancelled. DAOs for Humans, our speaker got COVID, and so he's not been able to make it. And now he
COVID's back.
Yeah. He also was going to be doing our breath work as Andy Dobrucki, which was going to be after all those sessions. So after this one, that's good. Everybody can take it easy, go to bed. You've done a great job. But yeah, thank you to our speakers
Well, hey,
for the session.
everyone can unmute and give Usheen, Sam, and JD a quick round of applause. Thank you guys for giving an hour and a half of your time, going deep into all the stuff you've been learning, building, overcoming. You guys are pioneers of the future, and great to see all y'all jumping on. Jane, Jasper, Stephen, Mark, Luca, Harold, Santi, Nicola. It's lovely sharing space. Kathy. Yeah, peace be with you all, and go out there and rebuild. Peace. Thanks for jumping, friends. Bye
Thanks
now.
for facilitating.
you.